So there's a new Snow White film written by Barbie director Greta Gerwig. It looks abysmal, frankly. Thought we'd examine the indoctrination of children, the dissolution of marriage, all through cultural products, and how Disney is looking to go broke as well as going woke, which is quite encouraging. Before we jump into it,
I interrupt this segment to bring you an important message about this stuff, the dollar. Not going so well, is it? Inflation is out of control and debt is even more out of control. In fact, the US government is on the verge of spending $1 trillion a year just servicing its debt. It spends about $6.6 trillion and it only collects about $4.6 trillion in revenues. So you can see that this situation is, rapidly taking a turn for the worse. You might want to consider some gold and silver. And that is why that we've done a partnership deal with Goldco, and we've created LotusEatersGold.com. Go and check that out. It's an offer for our American viewers. You can transfer a proportion of your IRA into this, and if you do so, you're going to get some of this lovely stuff, some bonus silver thrown in on top, up to $10,000. Or you can even take delivery of the physical gold to your home address if you prefer. So if you want money that goes clang when you put it down, check out LotusEatersGold.com.
here's one of Disney's routine dumpster fires. If you'd like to subscribe to our website for as little as £5 a month, you get content like this, which is Harry dragging me to see Black Panther 2. And we decided to review this. It's not good. We didn't expect it to be good. It's just, as you would, typical poisoning the well of racial propaganda, and the story is utterly incoherent, and it looks like Snow White's going to go the same way, which is a bit gutting. You actually drew lots of this to my attention, and this has been in the headlines recently because of the clips that have resurfaced. I thought that the original Snow White, it's I think it was, Disney's first animated film in 1937. I think it's one of the most successful animated films of all time. Adjusted for inflation, I think I wrote it down actually. It's the 12th highest grossing film of all time, so 2.36 billion. So proper cultural touchstone. And now they've decided, in the trend of pretty much every Disney remake that they've made recently, to destroy it. Have you watched any of the new Disney remakes?
I watched a few of them, and I think what you said about this being a cultural kind of moment is really important, because this film, made in 1937, is really about kind of good, beauty, grace, all those kind of things. Light defeating darkness. It's about good defeating evil. It's a very classic tale, typical of the genre at that point, that kind of carries some kind of Christian overtones, about kind of like, dealing with difficulty and strife in the world and overcoming it through, togetherness and love and all the kind of things that we know of a Disney princess. And so to take that kind of theme and completely overturn it, it is kind of marking that cultural trajectory that Disney has brought over the last, say, 80 years. And I think it's important to say that nobody thinks that it's bad for a woman to dream about becoming president or whatever the new Snow White does in this movie. It's no one's saying that no woman can have ambition other than waiting for her Prince Charming. But I think with the subversion of the original plot, what's happened now is they've said, in fact, women should not be waiting for their Prince Charming. Women should not want to get married. And you know what? They're just perfect without any man. They don't need any help, and they're just going to defeat evil all by themselves. And it's a completely different narrative and different moral to the story that Disney had, or the original author, even before Disney, had intended. Yeah,
it treats atomization as a prerequisite for female ambition and being your true self. And also, it's not... How do I phrase this? I'm going to step on a landmine, fine. Saying that women's aspiration should be to enter the halls of power which have been traditionally male-held, I think actually erases female forms of power. I mean, folks like Mary Harrington and Louise Perry have written about this. Traditionally, it's not that women were always oppressed by the patriarchy. It's actually that they staffed women's institutes, they were the custodians of culture, upholding historical societies, they controlled the reputations in the communities that they lived in. So they had vast amounts of social power, capital, and also with women's work before the Industrial Revolution, the roles were not interchangeable, and so husbands and wives had mutual subsistence reliance on each other. Otherwise, the husband wouldn't be getting clothed and fed. The babies wouldn't have been taken care of, and as well, women were paying rent to their feudal lords and chickens and things like that because that's what they were rearing. There was a whole parallel economy of mutual respect there, and that has been dissolved both by the industrial and the sexual revolutions. And it's sad to see Disney withering away and playing into this unisex presumption where all women can aspire to is being a simulacrum of maleness.
Exactly. I know. It's something that we've really lost, is that beauty of female and male distinctiveness. In the sexual revolution, they suddenly said that not only are women equal to men, which is correct, they're equal in worth and value as equal human beings, but they're not only equal, but they are the same as, and therefore they should be doing exactly the same jobs, treated exactly the same, not given any kind of extra help because they're also taking care of children. The workplace, women shouldn't be, should be molded and fitted into a workplace that was designed for men, and that this workplace shouldn't be molded and fitted around them, which would have been a better win for women, in my opinion. So now what we have today, and it's really kind of testified by this movie, is we have two extremes. We have either extreme feminism that says women are better than men, and women don't need no help from men, and we can just do everything, and men are silly, and men don't have a role in this narrative. And that's what this film is telling little boys, by the way, is saying that the prince is silly and unnecessary, and that's not true. And we also have this other kind of extreme red pill take, which is very reactionary to that, which says that women are unnecessary and women are silly and women need to get out and not take on this model of that you've mentioned, but rather be kind of 1950s back in the kitchen, make me a sandwich type patriarchy, I guess. And both of those say that one sex is better than the other. And that's just clearly not how we were designed to be. There's two sexes on this planet because they work together complementarily and, in harmony. And, women can succeed with a successful man supporting her. A man can succeed in his role with a successful woman supporting him. It's meant to be done together. So it's a real shame to see things like Disney, which are such a cultural influence, just throw this away.
Yeah, well, one of the reactionary to the radical feminism takes that I've seen fairly recently, and you can see this from Tate, or even someone whose shows you've been on, Pearl Davis, saying that men, it's fine to be polygamous and go out and cheat. And that does treat women as not having a complementary moral role, but being a series of commodities that you can accrue as a marker of male success. And I think that is kind of cope within the paradigm that has devalued marriage and the complementarity of the sexes. It's a Darwinian adaptation to the paradigm that feminism has set, and I don't think we're going to get out of it in that way. So I think it's worth jumping into exactly what the star, if we want to call her that, Rachel Zegler, has said. She, when she was being interviewed, I believe it was by Andrew Garfield of all people, the better Spider-Man, she said, "You don't normally see Snow Whites that are of Latin descent, even though Snow White is a really big deal in Spanish-speaking countries. Bianca Neves is a huge icon, whether you're talking about the Disney cartoon or just different iterations and the grim fairy tale and all the stories that come with it. But you don't particularly see people who look like me who are playing roles like that." When it was announced, it was a huge thing that was trending on Twitter for days because of all the people being angry. And Andrew Garfield said, those people, the people we need to educate, the people we need to love into awareness. And Zegler concluded, we need to love them in the right direction. At the end of the day, I have a job to do that I'm very excited to do. I get to be a Latina princess. Love them in the right direction. That's very Maoist struggle session of you, isn't it? I mean, I just don't like the gaslighting of the idea that if people object to the casting of she says she's a proud Latina. She recently did, I think it was West Side Story, the remake there, so she can sing, fair enough. But if anyone else were to come in, and I know hypocrisy is pointless to point out to these people because it's all about power, but if anyone else were to come in and play Pocahontas as a white woman, like Elizabeth Warren, she would complain, rightly so. But if you come in and play a Germanic princess and European heritage people get offended, suddenly it's an issue. I mean, it's okay to just denigrate historically white culture, I suppose, but there you go.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm not overly fussed about if a character is played by someone of a different race than originally, was written into the book. I think when we read a book or, have a story in our head, we all kind of imagine a different looking person anyway until we're seeing somebody on screen. But the thing about this is once you pick apart one part of quite a silly fairy tale, I remember this is called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. I mean, once you start to pick about one thing and say this is a political commentary and must be changed, then you actually have to start changing everything because it's not a political commentary. It's a silly fairy tale. And, is it not problematic? I think you raised this earlier that it's maybe problematic to also have seven dwarfs.
Oh, that's going to come up very shortly. But yes. So Zegler has confirmed that it's going to be politically correct. So she says, people are making jokes about Oz being the PC Snow White, where it's like, yeah, it is. Oh, thanks for admitting it. Because it needed that. It's an 85-year-old cartoon, and our version is a refreshing story about a young woman who has a function beyond "someday my prince will come." Now, if she doesn't sound insufferable enough already from me reading the quotes, we have 2 clips that have been circulating on social media. Let's play the first one.
Said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Snow White is running for president.
I'm launching my campaign. Yeah.
So again, defining femininity and its virtues by just having and holding male power. Didn't they recently do this with the Aladdin remake of where Jasmine didn't aspire to choose her husband for herself rather than arranged marriage, but she just wanted to be sultan?
She wanted to be sultan, which,
Yeah.
which I'm not sure is like a perfect solution to solve the problematic elements of the sultanship and
No,
the
no.
woman that would have involved back in the day.
But that was actually the message of the Barbie film, which I know you haven't seen, but it was like, oh, okay, well, patriarchal dominance is terrible. If you keep people in a subordinate position with no political representation and no job, it's evil. But it's good if women do it. It's like, right, okay, well, thank you for the naked power grab of you just want to empower yourself and control everyone. Appreciate the honesty. And then there's this insufferable clip from an interview that was circulating recently.
Cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power and what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagining the actual role of Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who can become a fantastic leader. And the reality is, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can.
I think the audio
come
might
into
have gone
power
there,
over
John.
a kingdom.
Also,
hear
the
it playing
fact
out your
that she's not
computer,
going to
but
be
not ours.
saved by the prince, and she's the
That's all right. We'll just sort that out in a minute. Anyway, so that gives your ears a break at least. If we just go back to if you don't mind, go back to the tabs, please, John. Fantastic. So I thought we'd move on to the dwarves bit because you've already pre-raised this. There was discourse
Sorry,
before
getting
this
ahead of
came out, where Peter Dinklage, when he heard that this story was announced, and again, this is part of my issue with Zegler. If you think the cartoon's really dated, why are you wearing it as a skin suit and standing atop its successes and all of the work of people that have gone before you? You are like capitalizing off of their creativity and then hollowing out for your own political purposes. Dinklage is doing the same thing here, and he's also screwing over other dwarf actors after making millions playing a dwarf on Game of Thrones.
Right.
And I seem to remember he was in Elf in like 2002. And the entire point of his character was that he was being called an elf and got really angry about it. So he's living up to his name, I suppose. He was on Mark Maron's WTF podcast, and he said, there's a lot of hypocrisy going on. Literally no offense to anyone, but I was a little taken aback when they were very proud to cast a Latina actress as Snow White. But you're still telling the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Take a step back and look at what you're doing here. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, and you're still making that effing backward story about seven dwarves living in a cave together. What are you doing, man? Have I done nothing to advance the cause from my soapbox? Must have been a very large soapbox. I guess I'm not loud enough. I don't know which studio that is, but they were so proud of it. All of them respect the actress and all people who thought they were doing the right thing, but I'm just like, what are you doing? Has anyone explained to him that they're fairy tale creatures?
Well, the thing is, once you start making a political statement about one part of the story, you can't stop. And that's part of the problem that's been caused by this kind of new take on Snow White. If you're going to update one piece because that's so problematic, then every part of it is problematic. It needs also to be updated. But then, that's kind of where woke ideology starts to fall apart is, do you have representation, and do you hire seven dwarf actors to play the seven dwarfs? Because, you would never hire, if it was, if it was Snow White and her seven female friends, you couldn't play male people to play those people.
Well, it turns out you can in Barbie if you're the
might
Dr.
be able
Barbie,
to.
yeah. In this day and age.
But we're so careful these days to make sure that the minority groups are represented, especially when they have a carved out role in a historic tale. But they haven't done that in this case, because then, it opens up other problems and other difficulties about how, if that representation is fair. So basically, as soon as you start meddling with one one part of an old story, everything's going to come crashing down, and you end up with a story that's nothing like what it ever was. It's not a fairy tale. It's just a piece of political commentary from one side of the agenda.
It's just acid on our ability to suspend disbelief, because these aren't people with dwarfism. They're mythical creatures that mine diamonds and live in a hill together.
Yeah.
And
her finger was pricked by a wicked witch. I mean, there's so many elements of the story. It's not a true story.
Yes.
I wonder if they have to be reminded of this when they're doing their casting.
Yeah, well, also, like, I would say the dwarves being dwarves and an all-male group of short people trying to live in a larger world is part of the reason why they need her, because they're dependents and she takes care of them compassionately.
Right.
And so she cultivates the ability to take care of these people in order to end up being a compassionate and non-naive wife for the prince. And so that's kind of a female hero myth.
Yeah.
And in that unisex assumption of that women should just aspire to be equitably participatory in power, we've erased the female hero myth. We've erased feminine virtues.
Yeah.
And that's why they can't articulate quite literally what a woman is, because they don't know what she should do.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point that you've raised, that in saying that the fairy tale was so outdated and that the woman had no role, you erased that role that she did have. But it clearly shows that that's not valued by the casting today. It's not valued that she had this compassionate care for those who needed help in her society and her fairy tale land. And I wonder if that's kind of reflective, or is issuing forward that thought in common day belief that women's role, whether that's taking care of children in the home, whether that's having a role that isn't a kind of glittering career, but instead of opting for a 9-to-5 job and getting your fulfillment and your achievement, your sense of worth from taking care of a family, I mean, that's been completely erased today, to the expense of loads of women across the country who do live like this, but don't live in a kind of London bubble where policies are made. I think that does kind of impact, the way that politicians view women as well, and the policies they advance to help them may not actually be speaking into their individual lives.
Yeah, I know lots of women, Mary's made this point before, that lots of women exist that don't have careers, they have jobs.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so they're not the privileged knowledge class like Charlotte Proudman constantly complaining that mother care isn't unisex person care or whatever it is, who benefit from things like their companies under ESG scores sponsoring their ability to have abortions so they can get back in the office, or the government paying for their childcare up from 9 months.
Exactly. I mean, these are the kind of policies that are advanced through Parliament, because let's be honest, while we do have a lot of female representation in Parliament these days, we don't actually have a lot of motherhood representation, or at least parents, mothers who have currently, got responsibilities to take care of children. So we don't actually have that representation in policy when it comes to making policies for women. And that's why, the kind of pinnacle of the conservative kind of mother care has been getting women straight back into the workplace as soon as they've given birth, basically. This huge emphasis on providing daycare for children so that women, are able to outsource that to the state and go back to the office and, do their daily 9-to-5 grind that many people don't find fulfilling, because many people have jobs and not careers. So I think this idea that a woman is, now just a prototype of a man wanting to work, wanting to be away from their family and outsource that labor and diminish the value of that labor, that's had real consequences and impact for women across our country who feel ignored, left out and unsupported.
Well, speaking of people that are being erased, have you seen what they've done with the dwarves now that Peter Dinklage has kicked up a stink?
I've heard one or two things.
This is quite funny. So these photos got leaked to the Mail, and I mentioned this in my Barbie review the other day, but they really do have to be seen to be believed. Now, the Mail calls them Snow White and the 7 politically correct companions. So if we just scroll down... Oh, right. For our audio listeners, there's only one dwarf among the 7. They're very diverse. There's homeless Jesus in the back. There's a couple of guys that look like they stumbled off the set of Pirates of the Caribbean 5. And then a black woman, a black man, a mixed race man, and a dwarf right at the front. So apparently in the film, there were rumours that the dwarves were not going to be computer generated fully, but they are going to be somewhat, and that they're not dwarves at all. They're shape-shifting magical fairy tale creatures. So this is just their human acceptable form. So that's just not Snow White and the 7 Dwarves, is it? It's not even remotely. And the guy up front there in the blue, that's a stand-in for the prince, and his name is just Jonathan.
Oh.
So she meets him really early on, I would assume by this scene, and what, is he just going to be the sort of hapless white male idiot who's led around by the strong, empowered woman like we see in pretty much every advert and film these days? And also, just a point on the Disney remakes. there is something you can do in animation that looks more enchanting than you can do in live action. And lots of the costume and set designs that they've done in the recent films, I'm thinking Cinderella and Aladdin, they just look gauche and kind of rubbish. This does look like an Amdram theatre production. I don't know who they drafted into the costume design, but it certainly wasn't as inventive as Barbie. Let's put it that way. There's also a tweet in here that Zegler had deleted. When she announced when she was Snow White, she says, "Yes, I am Snow White. No, I'm not bleaching my skin for the role." So very consciously race-based casting. Again, as you said, it's just a piece of political propaganda, and it's not got any thought to the actual integrity of the piece. And because that's the case, Disney are on a very downward trend. So Little Mermaid came out recently. Didn't look very good, I'll put it that way. And it barely broke even at the box office. So you're getting some real diminishing returns here. Because Aladdin, the Lion King remake, and the Jungle Book, I haven't seen either of the latter two. Because they all looked a bit Uncanny Valley as well. Did you see the CG in those?
I didn't see it yet.
So again, it just doesn't translate over from animation, which is kind of charming and whimsical, to like it looks like a bad video game.
Right.
They crossed $1 billion at the box office. Little Mermaid made 560 million worldwide, which sounds like a lot, but when you combine about a $200 to $300 million budget and then double that for marketing,
For a Disney classic.
yeah. Not excellent. I mean, The Lion King made 543 million in America alone and 1.66 billion globally. So diminishing returns on the marketing here. I mean, the redhead erasure hasn't gone down very well, and I don't think they will with Snow White either. Did you see the Beauty and the Beast remake as well?
I did see the Beauty and the Beast remake.
Okay, what did you think?
I mean, so I think Beauty and the Beast is interesting. I was listening to a little piece about this earlier from someone who's tracked Disney through the ages.
Right.
You know, back when Beauty and the Beast came out initially, that was seen as a real change in shift of direction for Disney, because Belle, unlike her predecessors, unlike Snow White, she actually wasn't kind of Saved by the Prince type, and she kind of didn't take a tumble from grace. You know, Cinderella, she was like meant to be a princess, kind of tumbled into this kind of role where she was actually a servant, and through her grace and humility, eventually found the kind of the good back her way, found her way back to being graced again with riches and things like that. Belle was different. Belle was actually seen as the first feminist princess who didn't take any fall from grace, with sort of humility, and instead of kind of fought her way back. And there's still a romance element in there because it wasn't, it's still historic, and they still had that influence of the time. But it seems a change of direction. So it did make me smile to see that come out before Snow White, and to see, this kind of feminist portrayal only amplified now, going back further and changing all of those narratives to fit more of this feminist icon, feminist hero, and turning the prince into somebody who was, in that film, he's obviously the beast. So it gives a very different spin to what the kind of the male hero is. And now with the modern takes coming in, Frozen and all these other ones, the prince character, although he's rarely like a prince anymore, he's always a bit stupid, always a bit, of a bumbler.
Isn't the prince in Frozen the villain in the first one?
The prince in Frozen is the villain, and all the male characters, in my opinion, are just like they're comic, but a little bit silly, a little bit like, oh, it's kind of your best friend who you're like helping out a little bit and taking along the journey to this epic kind of feminist movement. And there's nothing wrong with females having ambition and wanting to, go out and change the world for the better. But I think to say that it can only be done to the belittlement of men, and without having that partnership that, that both can flourish and strive to change the world together, I think we're missing out on something that is not going to be helpful for young boys watching it. It's not even helpful for the young girls watching it either. So Disney have really missed a trick in the way that they're shaping the young people of today.
I have quite a funny relationship with the Beauty and the Beast, because I did it as a stage play back when I was about 18 as a stage manager.
So
I was stage managing it because I was not in nearly enough shape or confidence to play the real hero of the story, which is Gaston. I actually found Beauty and the Beast quite funny, because both the adaptations, in the same way that Barbie did, got it wrong. Because in the revised adaptation, they cast, was it Luke Evans to play Gaston,
right,
who's shorter and an openly gay Hollywood actor, and then they had Josh Gad play LeFou, who was meant to be secretly in love with Gaston the entire time. So it's almost like poking fun and saying, oh, if you're really macho, you're secretly gay. The same thing they've done with the Kens in the opening scene of Barbie, which is just a bit odd. But in the original, it's like, right, well, if you look at the context of the time, Gaston was actually the hero, because in the town, of course, he was the noble hunter that everyone respected, and he turned down all of his gaggle of sycophantic women to try and marry Belle and have lots of kids, and then slay the werewolf, and tragically fell to his death. So Disney's been getting it wrong for a very long time, of course.
Justice for Gascon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they also recently added that this was ridiculous on Disney Plus, a bunch of trigger warnings to their stuff.
Really?
Did you see? Yeah. So they added one to Dumbo for the Jim Crows. Doesn't look great a few years on, but still, you know, we've got a strong enough constitution to recognise we don't need a trigger warning before watching a cartoon elephant.
Right.
Peter Pan about the Native Americans, and Lady and the Tramp for the Siamese cats. Oh,
Gosh.
get a grip! Come on, really?
Yeah.
And then
In the meantime, we have like drag queen story hour going into schools with no parental warning.
Well, in the meantime, as well, they then got all of the new animations, which are cultural non-entities. I mean, they had Soul, which nobody watched. They've had Elemental that's just come out, and then they had Onward and Lightyear, which mainly marketed themselves off of having gay characters in it.
Right.
And it's like nobody watched them for a reason. You know, it wasn't just Saudi Arabia that didn't show up for that box office. So they've all flopped. And then Lucasfilm, they've managed to destroy Lucasfilm by contaminating their reputation. Indiana Jones 5, which should have been a surefire moneymaker. I mean, number 4 was dreadful. It made loads of money. It's only just squeaked past $300 billion. And I say only because the budget was possibly $400 million plus marketing. So it might only make half its money back. Indiana Jones is a catastrophic flop. That's unthinkable from the original trilogy because they're excellent films. I think it's people are calling it the Phoebe Waller-Bridge effect of where they insert a brand new female protagonist who's super strong and quippy and actually denigrates the legacy of the male character. It's like Rey from Star Wars. It's just battery acid on a franchise. And so what this has resulted in.
Yeah, I was just saying, well, you just don't want to go to the cinema on a Friday night and be preached at. I mean, people want to go and see films to relax and enjoy an old classic tale, you know, good versus evil, and just like escape from the world for a bit. And instead, you just got the same politics that you're seeing on the news. Yeah,
exactly. And this has resulted in Disney hemorrhaging so much profit. They've been trying to sell it off, but they've just been seen as damaged goods. So CEO Bob Iger has said he might sell some of the company's cable channels. This is probably after the Fox acquisition about 2 years ago now. Its stock has fallen by more than half in the past 2 years. It's fired thousands of employees, and Disney Plus is losing billions of dollars annually because they lost in the last quarter, Disney Plus, ESPN Plus, and Hulu, 659 million and 4 million subscribers. So people are just sick of it. So my brave prediction is that Snow White is going to do really badly at the box office, and judging by Zegler's comments, it deserves to. Thank you for watching that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. If you enjoyed, why not access our website where you can get the podcast live from 1 p.m. UK time every weekday for free, in full, and uncensored. And for as little as £5 a month, you can get access to our library of premium content, such as my colleague Stelios' series Symposium, focusing on philosophy, with the latest episode with Bo and Josh talking about the linguistic subversion conducted by leftists. If you'd like to see what the rest of the content we're putting out is, you can follow Stelios on Twitter at Panayotu90st and the rest of us over at LotusEaters_com. Until next time, goodbye.